Muriel Bowser got up on a podium today and said that she is grateful for the surge of federal law enforcement in D.C.
We greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city. The most significant thing.
She has always been a weak leader, but she is probably like the worst possible leader that D.C. could have.
Meanwhile, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is already making plans for what happens when the president's 30-day federal orders expire. She issued her own order yesterday to continue the Safe and Beautiful Emergency Operations Center to manage the district's response and coordinate with federal law enforcement. She said the center will request that federal partners adhere to MPD policing practices like not wearing masks, clearly identifying their agency, and providing identification during arrests. While Bowser did not speak publicly about this yesterday, we did get Councilmember Robert White's take.
It is moving public safety in the wrong direction. It'll take us years to clean up the mistrust that is built in our local police department.
Mayor of DC needs to be recalled at this point. Muriel Bowser cannot be an effective ally to anybody who lives in the district besides ultra-wealthy people if she is going to say that she welcomes a federal takeover of the city, of DC of all places, a place that has been fighting for home rule forever. And luckily for district residents, it's not that hard to trigger a recall election. All that would have to happen would be that we would have to get 10% of the registered voters in 5 of the 8 districts, or wards, to say that they want a recall election. And at the next election, it would become a recall, or there could be a special election that could be called if the Board of Elections actually triggers one.
Boy. So we got to talk about the liberal backlash against D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, okay, who they say is folding to President Trump because of the fact that she signed an executive order providing indefinite coordination with federal law enforcement. Okay, basically, she's allowing the local police in D.C. to work with federal law enforcement to coordinate with them to the, quote, maximum extent allowable by law within the district. So basically, after admitting that, the National Guard bringing in federal troops, bringing in federal resources, reduce crime significantly. We're talking about carjackings going down by 87%, right? Now she's doing the smart thing and saying, you know what? It might not be a bad idea to allow the federal government and local law enforcement to coordinate in order to stop crime, because clearly something is working, right? Like, this is better than it was before, right? Let's continue this because it's the smart thing to do politically. Also, on top of that, it's the right thing to do first and foremost, right? First and foremost, you're saving lives, right? You're making your city safer. But again, for whatever reason, liberals found this to be controversial, okay? So controversial that Muriel Bowser had to come out here and to clarify that she's not really folded to Trump, that she's not really allowing the emergency to be extended. No. She's doing the exact opposite, according to her, even though clearly liberal media outlets like the Washington Post are not buying into her explanation. Take a look.
If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, that DC's Mayor Muriel Bowser was complicit in this federal takeover in DC.
And we greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city.
So when folks were jumping in the comments talking about that I was tearing a black woman down because I said
the mayor of DC is in Martha's Vineyard. While her city is literally under arrest and duress, she is not even in her city trying to find ways to protect her constituents.
And unlike DC's mayor, the mayor of Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson, signed an executive order to ensure that their local police officers do not aid the federal agencies. Meanwhile, Mayor Bozo signed an executive order on Tuesday requiring that the Metropolitan Police Department and local authorities work in coordination with federal law enforcement. There is no amount of identity politics when it comes to Mayor Bowser, and no political labels, whether it being blue or being a Democrat, is going to absolve her from the fact that she too is a fascist. While giving police and federal agencies more power while stripping resources away from the community.
Well, who hurt Mayor Bowser? Who was it? Asking for all of the residents of the District of Columbia. So Mayor Bowser just signed a mayor's order giving Donald Trump and his racist cronies unfettered access to the residents of the District of Columbia. This woman is on a rampage against everybody in DC. Because how you gonna preach for DC statehood in one moment and then give Donald Trump and his racist cronies an access to the residents of the District of Columbia indefinitely? Meaning that as long as Donald Trump has declared a federal emergency, Mayor Bowser has vowed that her, the city, and all the law enforcement agencies in the District of Columbia are going to work hand in hand with federal law enforcement. So let's talk about what this looks like. MPD with the FBI going into Black neighborhoods and terrorizing Black and brown people. PD going in with the DEA and conducting warrantless stops and searches, and also searches that violate the Fourth Amendment. The Metropolitan Police Department has just become emboldened to do whatever they want to District of Columbia residents, because you know who's not gonna stop it? Our mayor. You know who's not gonna protect us? Our mayor. Who hurt her?
Today, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser made some of her most forceful comments yet against the federal surge of law enforcement in D.C., particularly how district police are being required by the Trump administration to help with ICE enforcement.
As News 4's Mark Seagraves reports, the mayor also criticized the press for how her recent remarks in yesterday's mayoral order were, in her words, misinterpreted as supportive of the surge.
Mayor Bowser was on the defensive today after drawing criticism from her comments last week thanking the Trump administration for the federal surge, and then yesterday's mayoral order that lays out her plan to coordinate with some federal law enforcement agencies after the crime emergency expires.
I want the message to be clear to the Congress. We don't need a presidential emergency.
Bowser said she shares residents' concerns about the surge and President Trump's threats to take over the city completely.
People who are, like me, outraged over the intrusion on our federal autonomy. People who, like me, see protecting home rule and our autonomy as our North Star.
At a press briefing today, Bowser expressed frustration that her remarks and her mayor's order have been misinterpreted by some, including the press, as being supportive of the federal surge. Bowser took aim at the Washington Post and this headline.
I have to say that there was a Washington Post headline that circulated that was simply false. I went back, I reread that order, and then the hundreds of words that were in that order, there was no mention of welcome or welcoming. So that headline was false. And sadly, I think it was intentionally misleading. Let me tell you without equivocation that the mayor's order does not extend the Trump emergency. In fact, it does the exact opposite.
The Post changed the headline after complaints from the mayor's staff and issued this statement to News 4. The Washington Post thanks the mayor for her readership and remains committed to accurately reporting all angles of this important story.
Yeah, so this is how cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs of a country that we currently live in, guys. The mayor was basically shamed for protecting her constituents, for saying, you know what, maybe Trump is right. Let's extend coordination, okay? Let's have federal forces and local law enforcement work together, combine resources in order to fight crime, which should be a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer, right? It's the common sense position, and she's taking the common sense position. This is the right position, but again, because of how far left the Democrat Party has become, and also on top of that, they want DC to have statehood. All of this kind of undermines DC's ambitions to become a state, which is good because they should never be a state, right? Like, we shouldn't even entertain that conversation of DC becoming a state. So, yeah, I mean, again, this all works out in favor of Republicans. But regardless, it's the right thing to do in regards to coordinating with the federal government. The backlash was so great that she felt the need to come out here and to clarify, I don't support the Trump emergency. I'm not extending the Trump emergency. Well, it's like, look, at the end of the day, you don't have to do all that. Because, again, the people that are upset about this are the lunatics, right? Even the people who are on social media in the liberal media virtue signaling about how they hate the Trump crime crackdown. Behind closed doors, they love it, right? They absolutely love it because a lot of these people live in D.C. and a lot of these people don't want to be subject to crime. They're only against it because Trump is for it, right? And this mayor is actually making the smart decision to be for something, okay, even though President Trump is for it. Like, she's making a smart decision to say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is the right thing to do. But again, what happens in the Democrat Party, if you agree with Trump, is that you get shamed. And that's exactly what is happening to Muriel Bowser, and that's why she gave that press conference. So, with that being said, I want to react to this clip on CNN, the CNN panel, Abby Phillip show, where they're going to discuss this. And this panel discussion was particularly interesting because we have a special guest. Ben Shapiro's on CNN. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
I would just caution a lot of conservatives who celebrate all of this, and I'm all for crime reduction, but the conservatives who are celebrating this, you listen to the mayor of Chicago talk about the gun crisis in America. Well, what is the stop, given the precedents that Donald Trump is setting? What is to stop a Democratic, a Governor Pritzker, a Governor Newsom to say, you know, we have a gun crisis in America, just as legitimate on the facts arguments as a crime crisis, and say we're going to send the National Guard into states to go get their guns? There have to be standards here.
You know, I hate these type of stupid hypotheticals because that's what it is. It's stupid, right? This is a guy who is clearly overanalyzing, right? This is what happens when, again, you are a conservative intellectual and again, you try to play this hypothetical game where you say, well, what if this opens the door to Democrats doing X, Y, and Z, right? And it's like, yeah, that could possibly happen. But the example that this guy used of having the National Guard go to people's doorsteps to confiscate their guns is not going to work for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, that is extreme as hell. That is way more extreme than sending the National Guard to a liberal city to help crack down on crime, right? Or to help with local law enforcement. They're not the same thing, right? I don't think what President Trump is doing, I don't think he's setting a precedent that Democrats, if they ever get back power, can just send the National Guard to confiscate people's guns. I don't think that's going to work politically, okay? I don't think that's going to work logistically, okay? And I just don't see a world in which gun owners are actually going to capitulate to that, right? That would actually cause a civil war, okay? That would cause a civil war. Sending the National Guard to liberal city, that's not going to cause a civil war. But I'm telling you right now, there are a large amount of people in this country, a significant amount of people who are not giving up their guns, right? They will fight a civil war before they give up their guns. They don't care if Democrats send the military, and I'm not even sure the military would comply, right? I'm not even sure the National Guard would comply with those type of orders. So I'm just saying that hypothetical, in my opinion, is invalid because it's not the same thing at all, right? It's not that is way more extreme. You talk about sending people to confiscate guns. That's way more extreme. So I'm not worried about whether or not this sets a new precedent for allowing Democrats to, send a National Guard to people's doorsteps to confiscate their guns. Because honestly, at the end of the day, I mean, have you been around during the pandemic, right? The Democrats set a lot of precedents during the pandemic when you talk about firing people for refusing to take the vaccine, right? Or encouraging local law enforcement to remove people from establishments because they refuse to wear a mask, right? Things of that nature. I think we've seen authoritarian tactics from Democrats during the pandemic. So if you want to talk about who set precedents, dangerous precedents, well, I would say that Democrats have set the precedents, to be honest with you, right? So again, I'm not super worried about that. Okay, I think getting caught up in regards to whether or not this opens up to Democrats to do something in the future, I think is silly because Democrats are going to do what they want to do anyways, right? I mean, let's be real, okay? Democrats have no limit to their extremism, okay? So, I think that those type of hypotheticals are really a waste of time to engage in because, again, President Trump hasn't really sent the National Guard to any liberal city specifically to fight crime. It is not that simple, okay? In Los Angeles, we saw the National Guard being used to help protect ICE agents, and their deployment to Los Angeles is being adjudicated in court. There's been a minor setback because a liberal judge who originally ruled against the National Guard being able to be there, he got overturned on appeal, and then he essentially went back and looked at the case again, and he is removing the president's ability to have the National Guard in Los Angeles. So again, this stuff is still being worked out in court. Okay, a lot of it has to be appealed to the Supreme Court. So we really don't know to what extent the president can use the National Guard. And until that's actually worked out, again, I'm not worried about all of these hypotheticals about what Democrats might do if they take back power.
What is to stop that, Ben?
I mean, I think that, to be fair, the exertion of more power by the executive branch has been an ongoing process for the course of the last 20 years minimum. And you saw the Obama administration declare national emergencies, something like 12 national emergencies under President Obama, something like 9 under Joe Biden. Now you've had President Trump declare a wide variety of national emergencies. This isn't a unilateral problem. I think it is a bilateral problem. With that said, I think that we should separate a few strands here. One is the legal that Eli was talking about. One of the other things here, though, is I think what Van was referring to, which is President Trump does have a habit of wrong-footing his political opponents in a unique way on this sort of stuff. There were 574 murders in Chicago last year. And you can make the argument, I think a plausible argument, that National Guard troops should not be on the ground enforcing crime, both legally and just as a matter of general policy. But if the position you end up taking is that there is no serious crime emergency in Chicago on a rhetorical level, not on a legal level, on a rhetorical level, or you make the case that actually crime in Chicago just isn't that big of a deal, which seems to be the mistake that many Democratic politicians are making right now, Trump is going to win that battle all day long.
Facts. He is going to win the battle all day long, right? He's already winning the battle, right? That's the crazy part about it. I think the point that Ben Shapiro is making is that regardless of the legalities, Democrats and their reflexive, oh, it's not a problem, it's not an issue, it's made up, it's a conspiracy theory, makes them look bad. It makes them look like they're soft on crime. It makes it look like they're pro-defund the police, which, I mean, that's all true, right? They actually are soft on crime, okay? And they are pro-defund the police. Yeah, all those things are true, okay? All those things are true. So, you know, it's one of those things where ultimately Democrats are revealing their extremism. They pretend as if they're not that extreme when they, in fact, are that extreme, because anytime President Trump is for something, they're against it. And again, they're against it in extreme ways.
I hear you, but I also think there is the rhetorical level, which we could focus on. But I mean, I also want to focus on the reality, like the actual things that are happening. And even to that point, I mean, voters are not, I think we treat voters as stupider than they are. Mm-hmm. You ask them in polls and they say, we think crime is a problem. We don't like the way Trump is handling it in the way that he is sending the National Guard. They want Trump to do more about crime. They don't necessarily want him to send troops to cities. So voters can handle these topics. They're not
I totally agree. I think
idiots.
Voters see what's happening.
I disagree. I don't think that liberal voters can handle these topics. I don't, because if they can handle these topics, then Democrats wouldn't be running all these liberal cities. I think at this point we have to accept the reality that liberals in these cities vote irresponsibly. They don't vote in their best interest, right? That democracy has failed these liberal cities. I mean, look at New York City right now. They're about to elect a socialist. Straight up. I mean, there are rumors that Trump administration, they're trying to offer Eric Adams a job for him to drop out, right? That's what they want to do. They want to offer him a job so that it gives Cuomo the best chance of winning. That's how bad of a situation New York is in right now. Again, why is that? It's because the voters, they can't handle it, right? Let's be real. Democracy has not worked out well for these liberal cities. It just hasn't.
For what it really is, I see this presidency for the most part as like a kayfabe presidency. It's a wrestling term. Everything is theater, right? Because I question the whole premise that Trump is using to send, you know, National Guard troops on the ground. And of course, he's doing it in blue cities. I think crime is a problem in some of these blue cities. I am not going to minimize it at all. Thank you for acknowledging that, Van, because I think too many Democrats want to pretend like it's not a problem because they don't want to be held accountable for it. But it is a local issue. And if the federal government is serious about tackling crime, well, there are things you can do on a federal level that actually helps these communities, right? So one thing that you could do is, rather than just talk about the need for mental health care, for instance, which is like one of the root causes of all these mass shootings that keep happening, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Pressure Congress to pass legislation that allocates necessary funding so people get the help that they need, right? We're not going to be able to roll back the fact that we are swimming in guns in this country, but we can deal with some of the other causes that lead to some of the shootings that we have. Opportunity zones is another good idea. But Trump isn't serious about solving crime here. This is all about theater. This is all about shock and awe. That's what he specializes in.
That's why the National Guard in D.C., they've got them on beautification duty now. Mm-hmm. Guardsmen have reportedly cleaned more than 2.3 miles of roadway, collected more than 500 bags of trash, and disposed of 3 truckloads of plant waste. I think that is all great stuff. But the National Guard, at the tune of $1 million a day, because these folks have to be paid, are doing what the Park Service could have done if they had just been given their adequate funding.
And the crime rates are plummeting in Washington, D.C.
I
The mayor
understand
of
that.
D.C. is thanking the
but
president.
just to be clear, the National Guard is not doing any of that. The National Guard is not doing any of that. The people doing that are other law enforcement agencies like ICE and Border Patrol.
I'll tell you one thing they're doing.
And
I walked
ATF
around,
and others.
I'll tell you one thing they're doing. I walked around Washington, D.C. all weekend long with my family. I had my entire family there. And we did run into the National Guard. And I'm just going to tell you, having these guys walking around, keeping an eye on things, they were greeting the public. I saw a lot of people walking up to them, thanking them for keeping an eye on Washington, D.C. I think there's something to be said for just having more eyes and ears on the streets. People are less likely to commit crimes in front of 4 or 5 National Guardsmen.
Their visibility is a deterrent, but what happens once you pull them back, right? That doesn't really solve the root of the problem.
Well, it's a good question. And today, Mayor Bowser actually signed an executive order inviting an ongoing federal presence in Washington, D.C., and didn't put an end date on it. I mean, just as Ben said, she has acknowledged that this has worked. Crime has gone down. People are being arrested. Illegal guns are coming off the streets. And there is apparently some cooperation between a Democrat and a Republican administration, which you're not getting a scintilla of out of Illinois, which I think is a political mistake.
Ding, 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 ding. Scott Jennings, bruh. He might be the MVP of CNN at this point, right? Without him, I don't even know if I'll be reacting to these clips anymore, to be honest with you. I think I would be completely done with CNN if Scott Jennings wasn't on their network. He hit the nail on the head. It is crazy to me how these simple-minded socialists don't understand this, right? People like Abby Phillip, who, again, I'm starting to think is a simple-minded socialist. Because she's like, well, the National Guard isn't fighting crime. They don't have anything to do with crime going down. And it's like, again, this is what I'm talking about, simple-minded socialists. As Scott Jennings pointed out, and even Anna Kasperi acknowledged, okay, even though she's clearly not pro-Trump, and she's clearly not pro this crime crackdown, right? Even she can acknowledge that, hey, the National Guard being there is a deterrent. And because it's a deterrent, right, even if, let's say, the National Guard, they're all in the tourist areas, right? That's the criticism. They're not actually in the hood. As if they be cool with the National Guard in the hood, right? Could you imagine if the National Guard, and they was stationed all throughout the ghettos of D.C., these people will be boohoo whining crying racism, right? They will be losing their minds, okay? It's just funny how that works. But anyways, they're a deterrent. And because they are a deterrent, what does that mean for local police? What that means is that frees them up. That frees up resources for local police to deal with what they specialize in, right? That frees up resources for them to go after the criminals in these crime-ridden neighborhoods, right? If they don't have to deal with a certain part of the city because the National Guard is there deterring crime, then they can go do other stuff. And again, this is a big deal because across the country, there's a police shortage, right? There's a shortage of police. A lot of it has to do with the defunded policing movement, which has basically caused a lot of police officers to leave the profession altogether. Nobody wants to sign up to be a police officer. And when you have a shortage of police officers, then that means you got to pay the police that you have there more, right? You got to pay them more overtime. You have to work them more, and they can't respond to certain calls, right? They can't respond to all the crime that's happening because they don't have enough manpower to do so, which causes crime to become more out of control, right? And then you have all this crime that's happening, a lot of it unaccounted for, because again, they don't even have the manpower to keep up with the crime, right? This is why a lot of the crime statistics are garbage, right? This is why you can't really believe it, because police don't even have enough resources to accurately and properly collect crime data, right? They don't. I mean, you call the police, they're not even showing up. They're not showing up for, 2-3 hours. And if there's nothing they can do about it, they just move on, right? They're not even making a report. And that puts a strain on these cities' budgets, right? So what happens is that you have resources that are being strained, okay? And that makes it harder for police to fight crime. So if you have help from the federal government, those are extra resources that frees up resources for local police to go into, again, do what they specialize in the neighborhoods where it's needed the most. And that probably is what's happening in D.C., and that's why you're seeing such a reduction in crime, is literally because local law enforcement they have more resources, right? They have more manpower in order to deal with crime, which should tell you what the problem is, okay, in these liberal cities when it comes to crime. A shortage of police. There are not enough police on the streets.
I do see it differently. There is a way. Look, Biden made a mistake on immigration. When red state governors started shipping immigrants to blue cities and there was no response, there was a big moment there to bring everybody together, get those blue city mayors, bring those red state governors into the room and talk to solve the problem. Presidents can convene. They can bring problem solvers together. The problem you have right now is that's not happening. He's talking about people in Chicago. He's not talking to the people in Chicago. That's a big mistake on his part.
Allie, can I have the last word?
No, I mean, it's a big mistake on Democrats' part because the president's offering help, right? He's offering help. Again, legally speaking, it is up to the Democrats in regards to whether or not they want to accept that help, right? Because again, all these people will say, well, Trump can't just unilaterally send the National Guard into these liberal cities, right? This is what they say. So he's already offered to help. It's up to the Democrats to accept. They're the ones making a mistake here because the president is reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'm willing to help you. Muriel Bowser gets it, right? Even though she's getting backlash for it, she gets it. A lot of these other Democrats don't get it. They don't get it. And again, that's the mistake that's been made, especially by Democrats like J.B. Pritzker, who's thinking about running for president, okay? And again, they got to remember, they need to win general elections. That's what Democrats are forgetting, okay, as they continue to try to appeal to the far left with their Trump derangement.
You on the legal matter of what he can do in Chicago, because Trump seems to sometimes acknowledge he can't as easily just send them in. So if he tries, what does that look like?
He's right about that. It's going to be much tougher sledding anywhere other than D.C. and California. So first of all, what can he do and can he not do? He can surge federal resources. He can take DEA, ATF, FBI, and put them in whatever city he wants, ideally working cooperatively with the locals. He cannot, however, take over local urban police forces the way he took over the Metro PD in D.C. because that's a special case, special law. But the middle ground is going to be National Guard. The reason he was able to deploy the National Guard in D.C. is, again, it's unique. He runs the National Guard in D.C. California, the basis was the ongoing protests, which have basically reduced down to near nothing. And there's not protests, anti-ICE protests happening in Illinois or Maryland or New York. And so he's going to need a different legal hook when he goes into court. I think it's going to be hard legally for the president to say, well, crime rates are high, it's dangerous. Even if that's true, I don't know that that's going to satisfy the emergency statute that got him into California in the first place.
Yeah, well, again, this is why you send ICE in there first, right? And then these liberals, they start losing their minds. They start committing acts of violence, being agents of chaos. Then, legally speaking, it's justified to bring in a National Guard. That's certainly the playbook. Everybody knows that's the playbook. And we're going to see if that playbook actually works out the way that everybody thinks that it's just going to work out. Again, they say that it's coming, right? The crackdown is coming. There's been a lot of talk about this. I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how. And we're going to see what happens. I can't wait to see the reaction from woke Mayor Brandon Johnson when this crackdown happens, right? When ICE forces start going in there to Chicago and deporting these illegals and then these liberals start losing their minds. Yeah, I think that is what will trigger the National Guard coming in if liberals can't control themselves, right? That's essentially what this is going to come down to. Can liberals control themselves as ICE deports their precious illegal immigrants? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.